you know, you only do 10 to 15, 20 seconds. You might repeat 2 or 3 times for shaking technique. The areas that I use shaking technique more are going to be on the hip, face down, on the ankle, and on the wrist. I do shaking on the shoulder sometimes. With shaking on the shoulder, we always do a little traction. With some of the shaking, there is traction involved. So shaking the shoulder here, I'm going to just pull up her sleeve so I can get a good grasp. Here we need to grasp positionally for shaking the shoulder in the supine position. I don't do, you could do this in the prone position, but it's much more effective in the supine position. In the prone position, the client be face down, and I feel like you don't get as much shaking because the shoulder ends up, you know, bouncing into the table. So I just generally demo this in the supine position. That's where it's most effective. So what you're going to do is you're going to grasp around the wrist on the flexor side. See, my fingers are interlaced, and then on the top side, my thumbs next to each other. I got a good secure grasp, and then you're going to provide traction. When you provide traction, so you don't want to slip on the wrist and end up, you know, slip and end up pulling on the wrist. When you have traction, you want to try to stay in the same area. So if you're working with a client and they have oil on, what you're going to have to do sometimes is either do shaking first before you apply oil, because your hands are going to start to slip. The other thing you do with the top sheet is on, so we just have a fitted sheet with a top sheet, you can just wrap it around the wrist. And that provides the grip that you would need. I'll do that sometimes if I want to use shaking technique and already have oil on. I feel like my hands are slipping. So what you do is provide traction to the shoulder. See, traction. If you don't have traction, you don't want to do if there's flexion in the elbow. Okay, so if I start shaking like this, that's not going to be good for this particular joint, the articulation between the humerus, the radius, and ulna. You really have to, you know, get traction so the elbow's straight. Let's go into the shoulder. And this motion is almost like, you know, science class, everybody probably had this at some point in grade school, where, you know, you take a rope and you whip it to create a wave. It's kind of that sort of motion that you're actually making with your hands. It's not coming from the shoulders like this, okay? It's coming, your elbows should be slightly flexed. Elbows, again, move the wrist, just like when we use a lot of striking technique. Okay, so it looks like this. So you start off lighter, slower. Let me increase. Two up there. So again, we don't use this technique a whole lot for the shoulder. You okay? Yeah, that shares a little one. So with the shoulder, again, you only do 10 to 15 seconds, and that just helps to mobilize and loosen the joint. It helps circulate chi and blood flow. So again, like this. See it. And so you start a little lighter, and then you get a little bigger shake. So that's shaking the shoulder with traction. Another way to shake the shoulder is like this. You can relax here. Elbows like this. And then you're just going to hold slightly at the wrist like this. And this is just a gentle swing shake. Again, just to help to mobilize the joint. Like so. We'll do this on the hip when the client's face down on the table. You could stand here. I have students ask if they can stand here on this side. It's no problem. You can stand on either side. I think it's a little more natural to stand facing the client's head, like so. Then next for the wrist. So wrist, oftentimes people come in, their wrists are extremely tight and rigid, just musculature. I mean, we always do some muscle work, but shaking is very effective for helping to, again, mobilize the wrist. So 2 ways to do is one, thumbs are on top at the articulation between the carpals of the hand, and the radius and ulna, and then your fingers underneath are keeping constant contact, but they're flipping the wrist upward. So if you take your finger off, like this, the client's hand, you won't get much of a shake. You need to keep your fingers in contact. So it's not like this, like you lift your fingers like this. Thumbs just provide a pivot point on the top. There's light to moderate pressure here. So that's shaking the wrist. We'll do this in chair massage. The other way to shake the wrist is to use the heel of your palm, and heel of your palm is right on the client's wrist. Again, here less is more. If you start trying to make too much movement, you know, it won't work, it'll be more like you're rubbing over the skin, so again, keep it small. Okay. So that's shaking. And it's fine if their hand bumps against your forearms when using shaking technique.
So that motion is for